So, do you think it's true that a lot of the kids who are going to watch this on YouTube were conceived in parked cars?
Well, probably not so much now. In the old days, the cars were the most available place for conception. But I think that maybe some of your listeners will been conceived in vitro. But I think that many people, they told me that parking is just not a sexy topic. But I think it's a very sexy topic because some of us were conceived in a parked car, but also because parking is really like sex. Paying for parking is like going to a prostitute. Why should I pay if, when I apply myself, maybe I can get it for free? If you have to pay for it, it's just not right.
Donald Shoup, the legendary urban planning professor and the author of The High Cost of Free Parking, passed away a few days ago on February 6th, 2025, at the age of 86. I had the honor of interviewing him twice. The first time was for Vox's The High Cost of Free Parking, which I directed in 2017. And then a couple years ago, it occurred to me that now that he's in his 80s, I'd really like to interview him again while he's still around. So last February, I flew out to LA and shot that interview that you saw at the beginning of the video. When I tell people that I'm talking to you, sometimes I tell people that kind of you are to the study of parking what Charles Darwin is to the study of evolution. Does that feel accurate to you? I've just noticed every time I read anything about parking, almost always they're citing you. They drop your name and the high cost of free parking pretty much immediately.
Well, the only similarity I can think of is that Darwin waited until late in life to publish his book. And so was I. I think I was 67 when The High Cost of Free Parking came out. And I think, well, this won't go in your interview, but I had a brain tumor. Yes, the big change was when I had a brain operation in 1995, and then suddenly I was able to do much more research. For some reason, after that, I just picked up. People said that I hadn't changed, there was just twice as much of me.
Our culture loves these 30 under 30 stories, people who get super successful at a young age. And so I found it really refreshing to hear a story about a guy who didn't really hit his stride until a lot later in life. And he got there kind of accidentally through some unusual career pivots, through some unusual life circumstances, and ultimately by being curious about something that nobody else was interested in. You were originally a student of economics, right? Did you get into it? Were you trying to be an
I was an electrical engineer as an undergraduate.
So you had no vision of becoming an urban planner?
The engineering curriculum was so watered down with electives. They thought you should take English and philosophy and economics. I really liked economics, so I shifted to economics for my PhD. And in that, I got interested in the land market. And I realized that the single biggest use of land in any city is parking. There's more land for parking than there is for housing or commerce or business or industry. And the odd thing was it's almost all free. Even in New York, 97% of all the curb spaces are free in New York on some of the most valuable land on earth. It's free if you bring a car. And how could that not be a bad idea if you're an economist? So I was a bottom feeder for a long time. I was about the only person, at a major university like UCLA who was writing a lot about parking. And there was no competition. There were no other academics who had thought that parking was worth paying attention to.
I loved that he didn't take himself too seriously. As you saw at the beginning of this video, he seemed to relish presenting himself as this kind of stodgy old professor studying something boring and then throwing you off by saying some pretty wacky shit. His professional website has the URL shoupdog.com, which you should go check out. In one of our email exchanges before Christmas, he signed the email, "All best wishes for a decent, sober, temperate, and respectable new year, undisfigured by extravagance and untainted by excess. signed Shoup Dog. Another time he signed an email with a meme of himself being presented as Obama. It was obvious to me that he knew that he had become quite influential, but at the end of the day, I always found him to be super warm and personable. He invited me to call him by his first name, Don, and every time we shot with him, he always invited me to get lunch afterwards.
Would you like to stay for lunch on campus?
But he was deeply committed to his thesis that he wasn't anti-car, he wasn't anti-driving. After all, he lived in Los Angeles and drove around plenty.
I think LA is a wonderful place to live in,
Right.
but I doubt if it's that great for a tourist.
But as an economist, he was anti-valuable land being wasted on parking that we don't even need or use. And he saw LA as being the perfect place to observe that. So originally when we were discussing locations to film this interview, you had joked that UCLA has like 20,000 parking spots and we could film in maybe one of them. And so I thought that was a great idea, so we did. And then you specifically recommended this top level, level 7 of parking structure 3. And last night you sent me this PDF that you've been documenting this exact spot for the past, like 7 or 8 years or something, just showing that this is always empty.
Well, yes, I learned a lot about parking by looking at it on the UCLA campus. UCLA used to have more parking spaces than any other campus on earth. At the peak, I think 23,000 parking spaces.
In a lot of cases, parking is just wasted space. We've built way too many parking spots, right?
Expensive wasted space.
Expensive wasted space.
This structure that we're in right now was built in the 1990s, and it's a long drive up. It takes about 5 minutes, I think, to get up to the top of this structure. Before class, on almost every day, I would walk up to the top deck that we're on now and take a photograph, and I never saw a single car parked on this top deck. The only time I saw anybody up here was a skateboarder who said that this is a great place for skateboarding because there's never any traffic, and it's sloped, it's just terrific, you can do whatever you want. And then you can see there are no oil spots on any of the parking spaces. You can see where people are doing wheelies in their cars. You can see the skid marks, but there's no evidence that anybody has ever parked here except us now.
You use this term called, it's a paid parking derangement syndrome.
Yes, I think most of us are so accustomed to parking free, it seems unjust to be charged for parking. That whenever you go to a public meeting, if they talk about charging more for parking, people, their mental activity shifts to a lower functioning. That they'll say things about parking that they would never say about something that they know about. If they're an accountant, they wouldn't say nonsense about accounting. But when it comes to parking, everybody has an opinion. A strong opinion. Nobody wants to pay for parking, including you or me. In a public meeting, if somebody brings up the idea of charging for parking, you're putting in parking meters on the street. Are there parking meters on where you live in Brooklyn?
No. Sometimes there are.
Yeah, but on your block?
There's not on my block. It's
so,
just strictly, yeah.
So again, some of the most expensive land on earth, and it's free if you bring a car. Who goes to those meetings? Well, it's the people like you who park a car on the street, and you don't want to pay for parking. It sounds in the public meeting as though everybody wants free parking. Because if you don't own a car, you wouldn't go to a meeting on parking meters.
There's a lot more in this interview, and in the future I'm going to release a longer video all about parking, but it was important for me to get this out now. Donald Shoup helped me a lot professionally. He definitely was a critical stepping stone in the advancement of my career, and I'm very grateful to him, and I know that a lot of other people feel the same way. As far as I could tell, anybody who took interest in parking, he was more than happy to talk to. My thoughts and prayers are with the family of Donald Shoup. Rest in peace, Donald Shoup. Thank you for helping so many of us learn about parking.
If I'm on a job where it is a full rate, it's a paid professional job.
Unlike this one.
I count this.
Oh, really?
There's tiers.
Muddling the line.
It's there.
You've had lamer gigs on this one.
Oh, God.
Sick, man. That's high praise. Thank you.
Yeah, I've had way lamer gigs.
Any other thoughts about this production? What was the worst part?
Well, I've now shot with you probably, 5 or 6 times. And I
Ever?
still haven't met
It's just because you're not on the East Coast, dude.
so let's fix that.
If we do any LA gigs, you're the first guy I'll call.